Law versus Doflamingo is one of the most pivotal fights in all of One Piece. And during this fight, Law told Doflamingo D will bring a storm once more. We also know that Law had a great friend from his childhood known as Roshinante or Corazon. He too also told characters that the D will always cause another storm. This ties into how he then went on to state how the Ds are the enemies of the gods. Later on in the story, we saw Dragon save his son Luffy at Logtown by using storm-esque attacks. This Stormbringer then even went on to wage war against the celestial dragons, specifically the gods of the world. Do you see what Oda's doing there? Have you yet realized the amazing foreshadowing that Oda's putting right in front of our face? During the Reverie flashback, Oda even went on to name all 5 of the Gorosei members that work for Imu, the king of the world. They all fit a theme, being that their names correlate with the planets in our solar system. And it just so happens that one of these planets, Saturn specifically, has arrived on Egghead Island. Oda is a complete mastermind with his story, and be prepared because I'm about to blow your mind. In real life, during the year of 2004, astronomers noticed something astonishing on the surface of planet Saturn. There was a wild storm that eradicated everything in its path, and astronomers dubbed it as Dragon Storm. From the very start, Oda planned to have this Dragon Storm hit Saturn because D will bring a storm once more. This is why Kuma ran away leaving Marijua, this is why Shaka called Dragon for help, and this is why chapter 100's introduction to Dragon foreshadowed Dragon's return in chapter 1100. But before we jump into this mega theory, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for the sickest One Piece theory videos on all of YouTube. And my last channel was hacked at 33,000 subs, so make sure you're subscribed to this new channel. Like seriously, scroll down and double check. Now before we begin this mega theory video, I need to shout out a very close creator and friend of mine. All love and flowers goes to 3 Skull Joe on Twitter for helping me put together what you're about to watch. He makes some of the best theories you'll ever read in threads on Twitter, and he's someone I definitely co-sign when it comes to superb content. At 3 Skull Joe on Twitter deserves your time and follow, so please do me a favor and go show him some love. With all of that out of the way, I'm sure there's a few questions you have regarding today's video. Does Dragon even have enough time to reach Egghead? And if so, how would Dragon make that journey so quickly? Is there any reason why Dragon would go to Egghead in the first place? These questions will certainly be answered in today's video, so buckle up and prepare for the ride. Monkey D. Dragon was introduced in the story back in chapter 100, taking place at the island of Logtown. We didn't know what was really going on, but he did save his son Luffy from the captain known as Smoker. And when that happened, we got an infamous speech from Goldie Roger himself with Dragon's illustration to accompany it. There are things that cannot be stopped: inherited will, the destiny of an age, and the dreams of its people. Now for some reason, a lot of people think it's Dragon that's giving this speech. Oda actually quoted Goldie Roger, you can see it in the panel, but I just thought I would clear that up because that's kind of funny. Then further on in the story, we even learn that Dragon is Luffy's father and leads the Revolutionary Army. And unlike pirates, this army directly opposes the Celestial Dragons. They wage war with the world government, and they also liberate many countries that are members of the world government. And believe it or not, Oda has revealed some of these countries that sail under the flag of the Revolutionary Army. They include Vera of the Grand Line, Centauria of the South Blue, and an unnamed island in the North Blue. And a lot of One Piece fans think it's only Luffy that's liberating all these countries around the world. It's actually Dragon too, and we just have to keep in mind, similar to Blackbeard, Dragon also ate the off-screen Omi. We also know that the Revolutionary Army targets other kingdoms like Vodka, which we saw in Kaido's flashback, and even Leloucia, which was recently eradicated by Imu's usage of the Mother Flame power. The corrupt kings that run these kingdoms do horrible things on and off screen that honestly break my heart. We see them extort their own people, wage wars with other countries, and even sell people into slavery just to pay the heavenly tribute. But going back to Kaido's flashback, the corruption we see is done to win over the hearts of the world government. That way these people can have a seat at the Reverie that takes place every 4 years. And honestly, the Reverie reminds me a lot about politicians in Congress, where they have like these open hearings to make it seem like they care about humanity, but in reality is just a facade. This is even what Dragon mentioned all the way back during the ASL flashback, A Sabo Luffy. The corrupt world and the settings of Goa Kingdom was basically a microcosm when it comes to the whole world and the Celestial Dragons. And this whole philosophy that both Dragon and the Revolutionary Army carry isn't even new. Like, this is something that was a very well documented belief. We know that at least partly their belief system was inspired by the events of Ohara. And at that time, Dragon was already leading a clan called the Freedom Fighters, but after witnessing the effects of the Ohara incident, Dragon created the Revolutionary Army. And when he did this, he had 2 of my favorite characters by his side to form it, Ivankov and Kuma. And honestly, when it comes to the Revolutionary Army, I believe Oda absolutely knocked it out of the park. There's so many amazing characters, and it's warming up to be an amazing team between Sabo, Kuma, Ivankov, the vamp opium god Karasu. I absolutely love the Revolutionary Army. From that point on, the Revolutionary Army earned many known victories, but they did take a loss from time to time. And to extend that even further, we also also know that Kuma and Ivankov were captured, most likely during some type of defeat. We saw Ivankov during the Impel Down arc when they were in level 5.5, and we saw Kuma during the Egghead Island arc when he was experimenting with Vegapunk, who is a known world government affiliate. And just because Vegapunk did in the past work with the world government, I don't necessarily believe that makes him evil. If anything, I believe that the great old Vegapunk, the Applehead that we know, is nothing more than an extortion done by the world government. But to refocus on the events that are more relevant to recent times, let's shift our focus to something we learned during the Zou arc. We see that the Revolutionary Army lost their main island Baltigo since both of the Blackbeard pirates and CP0 invaded it. We know the Blackbeard part happened because Jesus Burgess snuck on Sabo's ship and relayed information to his crew, but the CP0 part is a bit more speculative, and I could only really argue that maybe CP0 wiretapped the phone call Burgess made to his crew. So think about it. We know that the Blackbeard pirates are currently sailing to Egghead, so if Dragon did accept Shaka's request and tried to help Shaka or Vegapunk on Egghead, we could see the Blackbeard pirates and the Revolutionary Army clash yet again. But now recently, we saw the Revolutionary Army raiding Lelucia right before the island was eradicated with the power of Mother Flame. They ended up saving civilians like Moda, who earlier in the story did appear in Ace's cover story, and the Revolutionary Army even told them to keep in contact with them. Moving forwards, we learn that Dragon summoned his officers in order to start an operation to raid Marie-Joie during the Reverie. The plan to declare war was not just against the world government, but the Celestial Dragon specifically. And this feels reminiscent to details we know about Roxy Zebek, because he too targeted Celestial Dragons specifically, and it was even speculated that he killed some of them. Now, I definitely do not believe that Dragon is the son of Zebek, and yes, I've heard every detail that you're probably going to comment down below, but I do think the parallels between Dragon and Zebek here are kind of interesting. But back to the Reverie, we know that Sabo and others succeeded in making their declaration by destroying the monumental symbol of the Celestial Dragons, the Devil Dragon Claw. But the overall operation that Dragon and the Revolutionary had did not go to plan. At Marie-Joie, Sabo saw Kuma being used as a slave, so they ended up changing their plans, which caused them to fight both Fujitora and Green Bull in order to save their ally Kuma. And they did manage to escape, but Sabo was lost in the process. Now, in my humble belief, it seems pretty clear that Sabo is or will be Admiral level, which towards the end of the story, I would expect the character of Sabo, who inherited Ace's will, to defeat characters like Akainu. This led into Sabo running into not only the Gorosei, but also Imu himself, and this led into some of the craziest One Piece chapters that I've ever read. Once that happened, Sabo made his way from Marie-Joie to Lelucia Kingdom, and Sabo sent a message to his leader, Dragon. Again, Sabo witnessed Imu and learned some of the most taboo secrets of the world, but he wasn't able to tell Dragon at that time because of the Mother Flame's power being used. Lelucia Kingdom ended up being erased from existence, and Sabo luckily survived, making his way to both Dragon and Kuma. And thank God for this event, because my supporters and my subscribers always ask me who my favorite characters are. Sabo's one of them. He's towards the top. This is where we then got the infamous chapter of Ivankov speculating that Imu is immortal and the knowledge of Imu's existence reaching the mind of Dragon. And if things couldn't get any worse, Kuma ended up taking off running to an unknown location at that time, which ended up being Marie-Joie. Now, with all of these things going wrong, how can Dragon fight his war against the Celestial Dragons? What is Dragon's next move? Is it to save Kuma? Is it to save Vegapunk? Is it to attack the Celestial Dragons? I have the best possible answer for you today. It's all of the above. Allow me to explain. Dragon has many forces in his hands like Bello Betty, Morley, Lindbergh, and my personal favorite, Karasu. These guys can easily group up together to go after Kuma and figure out what he's doing. And at the same time, I believe he'll end up calling his allied kingdoms and take over world government bases like the G bases. So at that point, it only leaves two objectives: save Vegapunk and attack the Celestial Dragons. And this is what I believe leads into Dragon's next move, Operation Dragonstorm. Now again, earlier in the video, we did talk about how D's are the enemies of the gods and the D's bring storms, and obviously this connects to Dragon, but I'm not going to reiterate and drag that through the mud again. But I believe that this storm that the D's will bring, or D will bring, is essentially a metaphor for the idea that there's going to be a large-scale war. And as we said earlier, astronomers in 2004 did see a storm on Saturn, and they called it Dragon Storm. This is way too ironic, and Oda's a mastermind. He knows about all these Japanese folklores, he knows about American events, sense. He knows about all these types of religions. It would not be wild to assume that Oda doesn't know about this. Surely he does. He literally named the Gorosei after planets. He has to know research done on them. But it is said that during the night of Saturn, the storm starts, and as soon as it hits sunlight, it completely stops. This pattern repeats, seeming to go on and off for a few weeks as Saturn rotates. Now I believe Oda's gonna spin this metaphorically. When it's talking about the sunlight hitting and the storm hitting Saturn, I believe this is gonna connect to Luffy. Luffy is the sun god, he is the dawnbringer, he is the symbol of light. So again, the storm starts, and as soon as it hits sunlight, it completely stops on Saturn. And currently Luffy is fighting Kizaru, but there's so many players that are on the battlefield that Oda can move around like chess pieces. This pattern can repeat until Saturn rotates, meaning he probably goes to a different part of Egghead, or maybe he leaves the island entirely. Luffy and the Straw Hats will need help on Egghead Island because of Saturn plus Kizaru plus Blackbeard and a whole bunch of marine ships. Vegapunk is one of Dragon's oldest allies for multiple decades, so him arriving to take out the fleet is the arrival of this foretold storm. Dragon has even been shown at Logetown to have these wind-esque attacks anyways. Dragon was also shown when he saved Sabo to have this wind-esque traveling method. So this means that Dragon most likely has wind on his side when it comes to traveling, making ship traveling very easy for him, or maybe he himself even uses wind so he can fly in the sky. Like for an example, during the Punk Hazard arc, we literally saw Doflamingo use string in the sky to fly like Mach 10, which is kind of weird in retrospect. So if Dragon has some kind of wind-esque devil fruit on his side, then it would make a lot of sense for him to be able to travel to Egghead rather quickly. Especially when you think about the theory that Dragon's devil fruit might be a mythical Zoan just like his son Luffy. I actually have a video on this devil fruit theory, but I'll give you guys a quick rundown on what Dragon's devil fruit might be. In Peruvian culture, there's a feathered serpent god known as Amaru, and it's most likely the inspiration for Dragon's character. When Dragon pulled up to Shimotsuki village during Zoro's backstory, Oda gave us a great glimpse of the ship that the Revs sail on. This ship isn't based on a dragon, but instead something more like an Amaru because of the feathers on the serpent's body. This is a type of foreshadowing that Oda loves to do as long as his readers pay close attention. Another detail is in the infamous art that the real world has about Amaru, because the scales on this feathered serpent is the exact same design as the tattoos on Dragon's face. Now we can actually pivot to focus on the powers of both Dragon and the Amaru to see how they connect. The Amaru is said to be the harbinger of rain, and I feel like this one's obvious because during Logetown, Dragon seemingly brought rain and a thunder strike to save Luffy along with a powerful windstorm. The Amaru was also said to show the link between the otherworld and the sky through using lightning, which again, a lightning bolt hit Buggy and it saved Luffy's life, so if Dragon's devil fruit was based off the Amaru, this just lines up perfectly. The Amaru was also said to be the harbinger of revolutions. With Dragon being the leader of the Revs, this would mean that the Amaru fits the bill perfectly when it comes to Dragon bringing revolutions to the world. There's been multiple instances in the story where Dragon has literal wind-esque powers, but we can even spin this into a metaphorical sense. With Dragon running the revolutionary army and liberating country after country, Dragon is bringing winds of change to the One Piece world, which is further emphasized when you think about how Dragon is always in a windy environment. It's symbolism that Oda is feeding to us. Now I have way more details than that, again, about Dragon's devil fruit being the Amaru, and if you guys want to watch a video on it, there should be a link at the top right of the screen. Go ahead and click that. But with that being said, if Dragon does have this mythical Zoan based on Amaru, then he could use this to his advantage by traveling to Egghead rather quickly, especially when you think about Kuma and this whole situation that we saw not too long ago. He went to Kamabaka Kingdom 2 or 3 days ago, and this is because it was right after the Reverie. He then went back to Marijua in chapter 1092, and the narrator told us that this was 1 day ago when he ran from Akainu. This would mean that Dragon has 2 or 3 days to use wind powers to make his way to Egghead Island for both the safety of Vegapunk and Kuma, whether Dragon knows about Kuma's embark to Egghead or not. And this is very possible because again, we have examples of Doflamingo traveling fast in the air, and then we also have Shanks. Like during the Impel Down and the Marineford arc, we know that Shanks went to Wano to stop Kaido, and this was mere hours before he arrived at Marineford. So if we're talking about Dragon, the most heinous criminal in the world, Yonko level, the leader of the Revs, this wind Logia possibly kind of guy, it would make a lot of sense that he could travel in 2 or 3 days to Egghead Island. If Dragon arrives and defeats those fleet ships, then Luffy and the Straw Hats will be able to defeat Kizaru, especially if they have the help of Vegapunk. And we also know that when the Dressrosa arc ended, we learned that Jesus Burgess snuck on Sabo's ship. This caused the old Revs base at Baltago to get leaked, which caused Blackbeard and his crew to attack Dragon and the Revs. And I know I slightly mentioned this earlier, but again, it makes a lot of sense. 2 or 3 days to show up to Egghead Island and have his rematch against the Blackbeard pirates. Now I would argue that there's actually multiple reasons for Dragon to gonna go to Egghead, and it would be a kind of 3 birds, 1 stone type of deal. One of those reasons would be because Kuma seems to be coming to Egghead Island himself. Earlier we mentioned how Kuma left Marijwa a day ago, and he's a perfect candidate for someone else arriving at Egghead. Like, Oda has been sprinkling Kuma content all throughout this arc, starting with the new pacifistas based on Kuma, Kuma's flashback with Vegapunk, Kuma's daughter already being on the island, Kuma's deep connection to Vegapunk, Kizaru, and Sentomaru, the trio, the list goes on and on. To see this ancient robot, also known as Mechanical Soldier, power up, it acts as a soft clue to Kuma as well. Now I actually have a super deep mega theory about Kuma's true devil fruit being the Hito Hito no Mi model Bastet, and it further explains why he would again go to Egghead. Not to go too deep into it now, but there is a reason that he ran into the cat burglar first on Thriller Bark, and there's a reason that he fought against a tiger known as Zoro during Thriller Bark, and there's a reason Robin visualized the cat when Kuma's fruit was explained for the very first time, and there's also a reason why the Bible he carries features some type of sun goddess when we know in real life that Bastet was the daughter of the sun god, making that woman on the Bible most likely Queen Lily. And we know Queen Lily has a descendant known as Vivi, who is currently with Big News Morgan's eavesdropping on Egghead Island. So it seems pretty clear that both Kuma and Vivi are gonna land on Egghead Island, and Vivi is going to inherit the devil fruit, the cat Bastet devil fruit from Kuma. Again, there's so many details for that theory that I haven't listed in this video, but if you're curious and you want to learn more, there should be a link at the top right of the screen. To me, from a narrative standpoint, maybe not a literal or physical standpoint, Dragon going to Egghead is a 3 birds, 1 stone scenario. Kuma, Vegapunk, and Saturn. But mainly this will be about Dragon versus Saturn, because it was celestial dragons that Dragon wanted to go to war specifically with. With that being the case, if something of this magnitude were to happen, it would shake the world government to its core, fitting the newspaper we saw telling us that the Egghead incident will shake the world. And this will cause the other Gorosei members to panic, and they might even send out a Kainu to protect them. But most importantly, Dragon will not miss his chance at getting one of the Gorosei. He will kill Saturn, and one of the Gorosei is now dead.